Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Cole Crawford. I'm graduating senior at Texas Southern University, where I'm majoring in political science with a minor in administration of justice. This year, I had the opportunity to work alongside my advisor, Professor Khol, and what we worked on is Beyond the Western Lens. So, a little behind why this project this year with this thesis was my research motivation was this past summer, I had the opportunity to study abroad in Oxford. And I had the opportunity to experience what it's like over there. And I was learning international relations and how that works. And then I had the blessing of being the student regent this year and seeing how metrics are compared and certain schools are compared. It really, those two walls hit each other and I saw a parallel between those. I started to ask questions about how are we comparing this public school to this public school or this university to this university when the historical context is completely different. So that's really what this research is about. So just some key definitions and some systems overview is what we're looking at for development is improvement in living and standards. So what the Western model is really after World War II, United Nations, they started to come together and develop these systems in place. And it was the countries really leading the charge. So after that, they had all their, they were just seeing a lot of success with their overall improvement. So they were able to develop the framework behind what development was, but it was taken out of context too because there was a lot of countries and they're being colonized and conquered on as well. So some measures through that's the GDP, the HDI, and IMF and the World Bank frameworks. So the structural problem in these measurements is one global system applied universally. There's no historical baseline. There's unequal starting points like this image right here. And what that ranking does is it shapes what kind of loans you get. It shapes the aid that you're able to receive and the overall investments. So if you're a country who has been underdeveloped for this long, you're given this loan for this amount, but then you're not really even able to repay that loan because you're always structurally on a decline as well. So my research question was, how do Western aligned development benchmarks distort the elevation of post-colonial states? And how do these distortions shape academic narratives and policy outcomes? What I looked at was a qualitative comparative case study. It was with Ghana and Belize. I chose those two countries because my dad's from Belize, so I have family from Belize. And then I did ancestry.com, and I found out I have some people in Ghana as well. So this research really hit home for me as well. So I used the World Bank, IMF, and the United Nations platforms to compare those overall systems that they had in place. And these are some frameworks that I used along the journey as well, just to find out what post-colonial theory is, post-development, and world systems all around. So again, these are the two countries that I'm looking at. What they differ in is, well, first, they both are similar because they were both colonized by British. What difference them is the size, of course. Ghana has around 33 billion people, million, and then the size of Belize is around 400,000. And the economy, what they're producing, Ghana produces a lot of cocoa beans, it produces gold, and a lot of infrastructure as well. On the other hand, with Belize, their main source is tourism, which we'll break down as well on how the IMF doesn't even, you're not getting, their GDP is not rated with tourism. So we're going to go through that as well and the whole overall development structure. So just to break down the case study, I want to just give some historical context behind Ghana. So it was their exported base, like I just stated, was cocoa beans, gold, and raw materials. They got their independence in 1957. There was a political instability in the 1960s and 80s, which we saw as well when they were developing as well. We saw that there was coups inside, and coups will come, and it will be westernized countries developing those coups. And there was a structural adjustment, the IMF reforms, and then the modern economy growth. So this right here is just a graph of the GDP for the annual rate. I just want to display it as well because what we can see is there has been a constant rate. There was a dip right here, but right here, this is what they're being judged off of. And this is the Human Development Index, which basically rates their life expectancy rate, their school, the gross national income, and then where they rank. So they're 144. So when the United Nations and when they come together to find out what exact loans or investments they are able to improve on these countries, these two systems, the GDP and HDI, are used in order to give them that money. So what we see with this though is with that structure, the IMF program right now is Ghana is actually in a debt restructuring right now. And there's a high debt distress classification. And the credit rating is a downgrade just because based off of what has previously stated or what they have on the GDP. So it's really no overall understanding of their market. So they're giving these loans and this debt in that case. We can say the same thing with the case with Belize as well, where their main sources are tourism and forests as well with lumber. They received their independence in 1981. They're a small service-based economy. So their structural limits, small population, and then their economic basis, tourism, and agriculture. This is a graph of their GDP this year. This was due to COVID right here, and this one over here in 1961 was for a famine that they had. But when we look at their human development index, there's an incline. There's an incline with Ghana and Belize. But what's happening is since the structure and the frameworks that we have, they're given these certain type of degrees and loans. So they have also repeated debt restructuring agreements. And since they have a small, vulnerable economy, there's a classification where they're just stuck in place like this, where they're not receiving the amount of aid. So really what we see with my comparative analysis is it's the same system, but different realities. We see Belize is misclassified and Ghana has underrepresentation. So overall, what my study overall did was I was able to form this with those past theories is there's benchmark bias within this. We see that the structural bias and global measurement frameworks, Western industrial model sets as default benchmark its narrow definition of development. So with that, my conclusion and future direction is the development indicators are not neutral. They reflect Western industrial benchmarks, and this creates structural bias in measuring post-colonial states, for instance, Ghana and Belize. So with this future direction, what I'm planning on doing is using this framework that I created with the benchmark bias and seeing how that works and how can we implement that with the HDI and GDP as well. Because when you go onto these sites, they have certain things like rate of electricity, or they have things such as how many people have access to water. But imagine if there was a system in place to give you the history of these countries, what they had to do before they even got into the system. Because after World War II, Belize got its independence in 1981. So that's 45 years, but it's still being measured to countries like the United States or China. So you can't compare those two together. Other than that, that was my thesis this year. I'm really thankful for the Honors College for hosting me for my 4 years here. It has been a tremendous blessing. Everyone has affected me in a positive direction. I'm excited to see what happens next for my life. I'm planning on going to law school, and God is the best. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you again. This was amazing. And thank you for